Everything you know about transportation just became completely worthless, and it happened overnight. This isn't about electric cars, self-driving taxis, or futuristic billion-dollar jetpacks. It's about a $2,000 scooter that flies. A scooter so revolutionary it just declared war on gravity itself. For generations, our lives have been limited by roads, curbs, and concrete, quietly shaping how we live, work, and connect. But hidden deep inside labs in Japan and Korea, a secret team shattered those rules forever. The Cyberfold Flying Scooter isn't just another tech toy. It's a direct assault on the rules of travel and city life as we know it. What does this mean for your daily commute? Why are entire governments panicking? And what does this mean for your city, your commute, and the money in your pocket? Stay with me, because this isn't just a scooter review. It's the story of how the ground became obsolete, built in silence, engineered to fly. Silicon Valley has always been obsessed over flying taxis, space tourism, and six-figure prototypes. A quiet revolution was brewing across the Pacific. But across the ocean, in tucked-away labs in Tokyo and Seoul, Japanese and Korean engineers were working on something entirely different. Not a machine for billionaires, but something anyone could use. Their question wasn't, how do we make a car fly? It was far simpler and far more dangerous. What if flight could fit in your backpack? The answer came in the form of a dual-motor, high-efficiency design packed into a scooter no bigger than an electric bike. Developed under the umbrella of BYD's Advanced Mobility Division, the Cyberfold redefines what personal transportation can look like. At the heart of the Cyberfold's success lies its cutting-edge battery system. Samsung's high-capacity battery provides the scooter with impressive range and efficiency, delivering up to 150 kilometers on a single charge. This is no small feat, especially considering the vehicle's vertical takeoff and landing capability. Such a feature is typically reserved for much larger, more expensive aircraft. However, the engineering team managed to integrate this technology into a compact, folding design. The dual-motor configuration is another key element of the Cyberfold's advanced engineering. With 40,000 watts of power, these motors not only enable vertical takeoff, but also provide smooth, reliable performance across various terrains. The precision and power of these motors ensure that the scooter is not only versatile but also safe and dependable. When combined with a robust cooling system, the Cyberfold maintains optimal performance even under continuous use, further extending its longevity and reliability. Additionally, the scooter's folding design is a marvel of modern engineering. It allows the vehicle to be easily stored in small spaces, making it an ideal choice for urban dwellers who may not have access to large storage areas. This practical feature doesn't compromise on performance or durability. Instead, it enhances the scooter's versatility, enabling it to adapt seamlessly to a wide range of user needs. This technological breakthrough wasn't intended just for admiration. It was meant to disrupt an entire industry. But before we start talking about that, subscribe, because we make videos like this daily, and trust me, you don't want to miss them. The price tag that shattered barriers. The Cyberfold Flying Scooter has achieved what was once thought impossible, making advanced aerial mobility affordable. Concepts like flying cars, jetpacks, and electric vertical takeoff vehicles remained locked behind six-figure price tags and regulatory red tape. They were symbols of a future that felt just out of reach, more of a Silicon Valley fantasy than something you or your neighbor could ever realistically afford. But all of that changed when BYD announced the Cyberfold Flying Scooter and attached a price tag that no one saw coming: $2,000. That number alone broke the rules. For the first time in history, a product with legitimate vertical lift capability, advanced electric mobility technology, and high-performance design was priced within reach of the average commuter, student, or city dweller. This was not a luxury toy. It was a mass-market mobility device built to be used every single day. And that is precisely why it matters. To understand how revolutionary this pricing is, you have to look at what the competition has been offering until now. Electric scooters from major brands like Xiaomi or Segway often range from $500 to nearly $2,000, depending on features and range. But these models are strictly ground-bound, limited to paved streets and bike lanes. Their technology is impressive, but evolutionary, not revolutionary. They improve on what already exists without changing the game. Flying cars, on the other hand, occupy the opposite end of the spectrum. Companies like Joby Aviation, Vertical Aerospace, and Hyundai's Air Mobility division are investing billions to build electric aircraft designed for short-distance urban travel. Their prototypes are sleek, powerful, and entirely inaccessible to everyday people. Early models are projected to cost upwards of $300,000, with operational costs and regulations, ensuring that they remain a luxury service at best. For most of the population, they might as well be science fiction. That is why the Cyberfold's $2,000 price tag hits like a lightning bolt. It is not only affordable compared to air taxis and flying cars, it is cheaper than many premium electric bikes and scooters currently on the market. And yet it offers far more. A 72-volt, 60-ampere-hour battery system, 40,000-watt dual motors, and partial vertical lift capability. For $2,000, the Cyberfold delivers features previously associated with vehicles 10, 20, even 100 times more expensive. The significance of this cannot be overstated. In consumer technology, price determines adoption. The smartphone did not change the world when it was an expensive novelty in 2007. It changed the world when prices dropped, and billions of people could suddenly afford one. That is the threshold the Cyberfold is aiming for. By setting a price that middle-class consumers can justify, BYD has positioned itself not just as a manufacturer, but as the gatekeeper of the next mobility revolution. There is also a deeper signal embedded in that price point. It reflects an intentional choice to prioritize accessibility over exclusivity. In the past, new transportation technology always debuted at the top end of the market: the Model T, the Concorde, the Tesla Roadster. Each of these inventions had to trickle down over years, sometimes decades, before they became part of everyday life. The Cyberfold flips that script. It begins at the bottom of the pyramid, designed not to dazzle the wealthy, but to empower the masses. This pricing strategy is already influencing how competitors and regulators are reacting. Industry insiders are scrambling to adjust their forecasts, and conversations about infrastructure, zoning, and insurance are happening faster than expected, because the barrier to entry has suddenly collapsed. Governments can no longer treat personal vertical mobility as a niche concern when the technology is being sold at department store prices. What the Cyberfold's price tag signals is clear: the future of transportation will not belong to the few. It will belong to the many. And this scooter is the first proof that the sky might finally be open to everyone. While industry insiders reassessed their assumptions, other unexpected changes began to emerge, from city commutes to remote escapes, real-world use cases. In the modern urban landscape, the daily commute has become a grind that drains both time and energy. Streets are gridlocked, public transportation is overcrowded, and the sheer volume of vehicles clogs every available route. It is no surprise that commuters are desperate for an alternative, something faster, more flexible, and less stressful. That is precisely where the Cyberfold Flying Scooter is beginning to change the game. This scooter is not merely a technological curiosity. It is emerging as a practical solution to the headaches of modern transportation. For city commuters, the appeal is obvious. The Cyberfold's ability to bypass road congestion is a game changer. Traditional travel by car, bus, or train is subject to delays and bottlenecks. But the Cyberfold introduces a new approach. Its partial lift capability allows users to avoid the slow crawl of morning traffic, cutting commute times in half for many early adopters. Instead of being trapped behind red lights or stuck in a bus queue, riders can navigate directly over congested zones, arriving faster and without the usual frustration. Beyond speed, portability is one of the Cyberfold's greatest strengths. In cities where parking is scarce and apartment space is limited, this feature cannot be overstated. The scooter's folding design allows it to be collapsed and carried indoors. Whether it is stored in a hallway closet, tucked under an office desk, or brought onto a public train, the Cyberfold eliminates the logistical headaches of vehicle storage. Unlike electric bikes or mopeds, which require dedicated parking or risk theft when left outside, the Cyberfold fits neatly into your personal space. Public transport compatibility is another overlooked benefit. Many city commuters rely on multimodal transportation, taking the subway, then walking the final distance to their destination. The Cyberfold bridges that last-mile gap effortlessly. Riders can hop off a train, unfold the scooter, and cruise the remaining distance without breaking a sweat or wasting time. However, the Cyberfold's appeal is not limited to the 9-to-5 commuter. The scooter's versatility shines brightest when you consider its potential beyond the confines of city streets. Thanks to its robust battery and motor system, it is well suited for weekend getaways and spontaneous escapes from urban life. Its 72-volt, 60-ampere-hour battery allows for travel up to 150 kilometers on a single charge. That is more than enough for a Saturday trip to a nearby beach, a nature trail, or a small town outside city limits. Riders no longer have to depend on trains, buses, or taxis to access remote locations. The Cyberfold turns those hard-to-reach destinations into accessible escapes. Additionally, while the scooter is not designed for rugged off-roading, it performs reliably on light gravel, suburban pathways, and uneven surfaces. Its 40,000-watt dual motor system and integrated cooling mechanism ensure stable acceleration and efficient operation even on imperfect terrain. This expands its range of use cases beyond asphalt and concrete, giving riders the freedom to explore without worrying about technical limitations. Perhaps most telling are the real-world experiences of early users. Online forums, social media posts, and mobility community discussions are flooded with feedback about how the Cyberfold is reshaping daily life. Riders report shorter commutes, less reliance on public transportation, and an increased sense of autonomy. For some, it has replaced cars altogether for short to medium distance travel. For others, it has become an essential tool for exploration, allowing them to access places previously out of reach, without the hassle of renting a car or booking a ride. Market analysts have also noticed this shift. As more people incorporate the Cyberfold into their daily routines, it is becoming clear that the product's value lies not just in its technology, but in how it integrates with and improves everyday life. It is not just another gadget, it is a lifestyle upgrade. And as the user base grows, cities are being forced to confront an uncomfortable question. What happens when the streets below are no longer the primary pathways for daily travel? The infrastructure panic, cities, traffic, and zoning laws under fire. While the Cyberfold has captivated individual users with its flexibility and futuristic appeal, it is triggering something entirely different among city officials and urban planners: panic. The very structure of modern cities is built on the assumption that people will move along predefined routes, roads, sidewalks, bike lanes, subways. But what happens when people start moving above those routes, on vehicles that were never part of the urban equation? The emergence of flying scooters, led by the Cyberfold, poses a fundamental threat to the traditional infrastructure model. For over 100 years, cities have invested billions in roads, bridges, tunnels, and public transportation systems. These networks have dictated how people move and how city budgets are allocated. Now, a $2,000 scooter is undermining that model, and governments are not sure how to respond. Zoning laws, traffic codes, and road regulations were not written with partial lift scooters in mind. Current systems categorize vehicles as either ground-based or aircraft. The Cyberfold does not fit neatly into either box. It operates close to the ground but does not require roads. It lifts off but is not an aircraft. This gray area has left regulators scrambling. Should the scooter be subject to motor vehicle laws, airspace regulations, or should entirely new categories be created? City planners face additional logistical headaches. Many urban areas rely heavily on revenue from parking fees, public transit fares, and vehicle registrations. If more commuters adopt flying scooters and bypass these systems, cities could face financial shortfalls. That money funds not only infrastructure maintenance but also public services. The widespread adoption of aerial mobility could destabilize these budgets, forcing municipalities to rethink their revenue models. Beyond the financial concerns, there are practical implications. Cities will need to invest in new infrastructure to support this technology. That includes vertical takeoff zones, micro-landing pads, and possibly even dedicated aerial corridors to manage traffic and avoid collisions. Without proactive planning, the chaos currently seen on streets could simply move into the air. Public safety is another concern. How do you ensure that thousands of personal flying devices operate safely in dense urban environments? What happens when these scooters share space with drones, delivery aircraft, and emergency services? There is no precedent for this level of low-altitude traffic. Without clear guidelines, accidents and legal liabilities are inevitable. Policymakers are now facing a dilemma. Move quickly to adapt infrastructure and regulations, or risk falling behind and losing control of the skies. Early adopters have already demonstrated the demand. The question is whether governments can keep up. And as these regulatory battles unfold, the world is beginning to realize this scooter is not just about personal convenience. It is about how cities themselves will function in the coming decade. The foundation is already cracking. What comes next may redefine everything. But is this even legal? As the Cyberfold enters the spotlight, the most immediate and overlooked question is not whether it works, it is whether it is allowed to exist. Regulatory uncertainty hangs over the scooter like low-hanging fog. Is it technically flying? Is it ground-based? Is it governed by traditional road laws or modern airspace regulations? These are not just semantic questions. They are fundamental to how this technology will be accepted or rejected by cities, countries, and entire markets. At the center of the debate is the nature of the scooter itself. The Cyberfold incorporates elements of vertical takeoff and landing technology, allowing for limited vertical lift that assists with maneuverability and congestion avoidance. However, it does not behave like a drone, nor does it fly at the altitudes typically associated with unmanned aerial vehicles or flying cars. This puts it in a gray area, one that is not clearly defined by either airspace law or traditional motor vehicle regulations. That uncertainty has created a pause in regulatory circles. Until there is consensus on how to classify the Cyberfold, it may remain stuck between two worlds. In the United States, federal aviation agencies have clear rules for drones and manned aircraft, but very little infrastructure for vehicles that operate somewhere in between. The Federal Aviation Administration does not currently recognize vehicles like the Cyberfold as aircraft, meaning the burden of regulation falls to state and municipal authorities. This opens the door to a patchwork of local policies, where a rider may be perfectly legal in one city but fined or stopped in another. This inconsistency is already visible in electric scooter laws across the country, where some cities embrace them while others ban them outright. The addition of lift capabilities complicates the matter even further. Japan, where much of the Cyberfold's engineering and design has been rooted, faces a different regulatory climate. Japanese authorities have traditionally taken a cautious but structured approach to transportation innovation. The Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, Transport, and Tourism has already outlined guidelines for unmanned aerial systems, and recent updates to Japan's national aviation laws have begun to accommodate low-altitude flight in densely populated areas. This makes Japan a more receptive environment for hybrid transport solutions like the Cyberfold, especially when the vehicle operates within a confined altitude range and maintains close-to-ground proximity. In Europe, regulatory progress has moved at a different pace. The European Union Aviation Safety Agency has established a framework for urban air mobility, including electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicles. However, these frameworks are primarily focused on piloted or autonomous air taxis operating at higher altitudes. Personal mobility devices like the Cyberfold fall outside the existing legislation. Although the European Commission has signaled interest in supporting innovation in micromobility, cities such as Paris and Amsterdam are already facing congestion challenges and are testing small-scale air mobility pilots, but widespread legal clarity remains distant. The core challenge regulators face is how to define something that does not fit existing categories. The Cyberfold is not a toy, not a conventional scooter, and not a drone. It is a hybrid vehicle that borrows elements from multiple transport technologies. Without a legal classification, it cannot be properly taxed, insured, or regulated. And that could prove to be the biggest obstacle to adoption. For now, most users are riding it on private property, controlled urban test zones, or regions with minimal enforcement. But that is not a sustainable model if the Cyberfold aims for global scalability. And so we arrive at the most critical inflection point of this story. If cities and nations move quickly to establish clear guidelines, the Cyberfold and other hybrid transport vehicles could become an integral part of daily life, revolutionizing mobility, the same way smartphones redefined communication. But if regulation lags, or worse, reacts with blanket bans driven by fear or bureaucracy, this entire category of innovation could be halted before it has a chance to mature. The road ahead is wide open, but it is littered with legal questions waiting to be answered. The line between innovation and prohibition. At first glance, it may seem like the Cyberfold's biggest challenges are mechanical: battery life, motor stability, terrain handling. But the true test is legal. The technology is ready. The question now is whether governments are. History is full of examples where regulation shaped the fate of groundbreaking ideas. The Segway promised a mobility revolution in the early 2000s, but stumbled in part because cities could not figure out where it belonged. Too fast for sidewalks, too light for roads. It fell through the cracks. The Cyberfold risks a similar fate if it cannot clearly define its legal identity. There is also the issue of perception. Public acceptance of flying devices remains cautious, especially in crowded urban areas. Noise, privacy, and safety are top concerns. While the Cyberfold is designed to be quiet, efficient, and low altitude, its association with flying might trigger fear-driven regulation. Cities that are already overwhelmed with scooter clutter may be hesitant to allow a new category of device that seems even less controlled. Even if the Cyberfold is fundamentally safer than a drone or e-scooter, its marketing as a flying scooter could spark pushback before understanding sets in. Then there is the question of infrastructure. Without designated launch pads, micro-landing zones, or digital flight corridors, hybrid vehicles like the Cyberfold have limited options for legal deployment. Some cities are already experimenting with vertiports for larger electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, but none have yet created a tiered infrastructure plan that includes personal, foldable flyers. Until those systems are in place, the Cyberfold may be limited to private properties, test regions, or informal usage zones. Insurance is another untested frontier. Is the Cyberfold insured like a bicycle, a scooter, or a drone? What happens in the event of a collision with a person, a vehicle, or a building? Without standard liability frameworks, both users and cities remain exposed. This is particularly important as the number of users grows. A handful of early adopters may fly under the radar, literally and figuratively. But once there are thousands of these vehicles on the streets or in low airspace, questions of responsibility will become unavoidable. International coordination may also prove essential. Just as electric cars eventually benefited from cross-border standardization of charging protocols and emissions metrics, flying mobility devices will need consistent rules. A Cyberfold that is legal in Tokyo but banned in San Francisco would hinder the company's growth and confuse consumers. The potential for misalignment is high, but so is the potential for leadership. Governments that move first to welcome and regulate these vehicles could become early hubs for air-based urban mobility. And so, we end at a crossroads. The Cyberfold is ready. The public is curious. The infrastructure could evolve. But the question remains, will regulation support the future or smother it? This could either be the next iPhone moment for mobility or be banned before it lifts off. But the truth is a lot more complicated than that. Flying scooters are just the beginning. The Cyberfold is not an isolated marvel. It is part of a rising wave of personal-scale air mobility that is already being engineered, tested, and, in some cases, quietly rolled out. This isn't just about scooters or about one company. It is about an entirely new category of transportation that blurs the line between ground and air. And the Cyberfold is simply the most accessible face of that shift. Take the Rise Recon, for example, a 6-rotor electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicle designed for recreational and short-distance rural use. Though priced significantly higher at over $150,000, the Rise Recon shares an important DNA strand with the Cyberfold. Personal freedom of movement, untethered from roads. Where the Cyberfold aims at portability and affordability, the Rise is focused on low-altitude utility, especially in agriculture and land surveying. It lacks the portability of a scooter but pushes the same message. Mobility should no longer be constrained to the ground. Then there is the Jetson 1, a single-person electric flying vehicle from Sweden. This model gained viral attention for its cockpit-like design and open-air layout. It offers about 20 minutes of flight time per charge and has a list price of just under $100,000. Jetson 1 is far from a commuter device, but it showcases how electric propulsion and flight control technology are getting simpler, lighter, and closer to civilian hands. Like the Cyberfold, it invites a re-evaluation of where and how personal travel begins. Even Kawasaki is entering the scene with its experimental K-Racer X1, a flying bike developed in collaboration with research institutions in Japan. Though still in prototype form, the concept is aimed at creating lighter-than-air, single-person mobility devices for everyday use. These entries reinforce that the Cyberfold is just the start of a broader transition, a warm-up to a new consumer category. Where the Cyberfold differentiates itself is accessibility. While other vehicles chase performance or luxury, the Cyberfold delivers usability today in cities without a license or launch pad. It doesn't pretend to be a flying car. It is a bridge, a proof of concept, and a first step into something bigger. This isn't about science fiction anymore. It's about what's next. But what do you think about the potential economic, social, and environmental consequences of these advancements? Could this shift in mobility redefine how we connect, trade, and sustain our global infrastructure? Share your thoughts on how these changes might impact your own daily life. Comment down below and let's talk. Thanks for staying till the end.